To add user authentication and user management to your Reflex app, you have various options to do that. The first one is to do everything by yourself. You set up an email service to send emails when somebody signs up, forgets their password. You write code to use the single sign-on options of many providers. But of course, this takes a lot of time, especially when you want to add multi-factor authorization and other stuff. Second option is you use a React library that does exactly this and wrap it for Reflex. There are options such as, for example, the Reflex Google Auth from Mason. The problem I had here is when I want to add multiple SSO options, then it can get a little bit messy. There is the great wrapper for Clerk from Elliot. This is something I showed in a previous video, and it works great. Just the thing is, when something doesn't work, maybe Elliot doesn't have time to change it all the time, right? So this is a community project, and I myself am very bad with wrapping React for Reflex. I think many people in the Discord share the same opinion. So I was looking for a third option. And the third option is to use an authentication service such as Clerk, but without wrapping any React, and just do everything natively with their Python library. And that's what we're going to do today with Kinde. Kinde is, well, similar as a Clerk. You can plug it into your app and use it. Now, how do we do it to use Kinde in your Reflex app to have first-class authentication? First of all, we have to create a new Reflex project. We can use the new version 0.6.0. Reflex in it. We will just initialize the example Reflex project. Let's check it out how it looks like right now. Great, now it should run on localhost 3000 and perfect, welcome to Reflex. Now, next on you have to create an account here and you have to add a business. So that is how it works. Each business has all its users. Each business can have multiple applications. We just call it here Reflex Showcase. Perfect, we use Ireland so that it's hosted in Europe. Yeah. And now what I do here is I say I want to use it with my existing code base. Nothing much happens apart from that they ask you which technology you use. Python. Great. And now we will use email and Google already, just for trying it out. How the user sign in. Next. Great. Now I say I'll explore my own pace, but you can see that now here we have our Python app. And now if we go to the Python app, we can get the necessary API keys. So we need this stuff. Let's start by adding to our Reflex app dot environment. Very well. Now in the .env file, I just copied over all the environment variables that we will need for now. And Kinde host is the domain. Client ID, well, it's client ID. Client secret is secret. Redirect URL will be localhost. Okay, just localhost 3000 for the setup that we will use right now. And post logout redirect URL as well. Now we also have to fill in here. So we fill this, no, not this one. Here, yeah. So here we fill in the 3000. When you deploy it to a live the environment, then you just write your domain, yeah, https yourdomain.com to both. Okay, now that we got this, ask for first last name. Already have an account, use Crowder. Yeah, that looks good. I will save it. It's saved. Perfect. Now, what we do is we add some fucking Kinde Auth to our app. First of all, we have to install the Kinde SDK. Kinde Python SDK. That's what we're gonna install very well. Now, so that's what we're gonna use, the configuration of Kinde, API client. Now let's start by setting up the configuration of. First, get all the environment variables that we just set in the .env file, and then set up the Kinde configuration params. So this is how you have to interact with their SDK. You set configuration to the config that you have here. You just have to pass the host, and then some other configuration parameters that we will need now. Now here we already have the Kinde client initialized. And now let's rename this to auth state, because this is mainly about authentication, right? And we add some things. It's not a lot, it's mainly just some functions to interact with Kinde. So the first thing I want to add is authenticated. This will be whether the user is authenticated or not, and he should be able to see the protected pages. Then I will add a function initiate login, and this here gets the client login, the login URL from the Kinde client, and will redirect me to the login page. And now that we have this, we can add already a button, let's call it login, that will then redirect us to the login URL. Let's try this out. Oh, what I shouldn't forget is to add the environment variables. So from .env import, yeah, very good. Okay, now that we have got this, let's run it again. Very well. We have now here, you can already see the login button, and when I click it, I get redirected to the Kinde login page. I guess it's a little bit slow because my VPN is somewhere completely else than Europe right now. Great, and now here we see this view. We are on the URL of Kinde, and you can customize what is written here and here. I'm not sure about the name, but definitely, hey friend, welcome back. I don't have an account yet, so I create a new one. And now I use my name, Paul, hi, and email some testing email, create my account. The default setup is that you get a code per email. So just let me get this code real quick. Okay, I just got the code now. Now I continue, and what happens now is that I get redirected to my Reflex page, which we specified in the redirect redirect URL, in both of the same actually. So now what happens here is that I get redirected to localhost 3000 with this code. And this code allows us to get another token that then authenticates us to Kinde. And now what we basically have to do is we have to read out the code that was sent and use it furthermore in our Reflex app. Okay, how do we do that? I will now just paste in all the things that I already prepared before, because I think it's a little bit faster than to just write all the code itself again and remember what I did before. So just paste in a bunch of functions and we'll walk with you through them. What we added here is user details. This we will use for accessing information such as the first name, last name, and email address. Then we have the initiate login function, which we already had before, and now it becomes interesting. What I do for this setup is I add to the onMount function the process login, not this one. Yeah, the process authentication. So what happens now on every on mount is that we go to process authentication. Where are we? Here. Wonderful. You can, by the way, find all this code on GitHub in the link. First, we get with the router of Reflex the parameters what you saw in the URL before. What's important is that we get the code and the state. So if we look back here, now we already let's remove this again, and let's just check how it looked like the code before. I just redo the whole thing. Yeah, very good. So here we have the code, and here we also have a state. So this is not the state of Reflex, but the state of Kinde. We need these two things, the code and the state, in order for here exchanging this code for an access token. And this is done by constructing the full URL and fetching the token using the Kinde client. So it's not very complicated. Yeah, when this works, I just update the auth status. I said self is authenticated, the state variable, to whether the user is actually authenticated in the Kinde client. Then I get the user details. Now, what you can do later on is that you can just check the state variable self is authenticated in order to display a Reflex component or not, which is a very nice way to authenticate users. Now, if we go back to the other functions that we called before, I think we were here. Yeah. Then I just clean the URL and redirect. So without this, it also works fine. It just removes these params from the URL. So right now we see all this shit. I don't want to show it to the user. So what I just do is I redirect back to the root page so that they don't see it. And then we're actually done in case we can find these URL parameters in the URL. However, sometimes, of course, I mean, most of the time, the user just loads the page without any of this. So just like this. And in this case, what we do is we attempt a silent authentication. The idea here is that this here is the protected page, and the user never gets to see it unless they are logged in. But if they're already logged in, they shouldn't have to click again the login button, but they're just logged in automatically. So what I do here is with the silent auth is to just redirect them again to the login URL, but with these additional parameters of prompt none. This is how you have to interact with Kinde. But now let's also change this here, that when we are authenticated, that we display the username and the logout button. Otherwise, we display the login button so that we can actually see the change. And for this, perform logout, we also need a function. Which just logs out the user. What we basically do is we just call the logout of Kinde and also tell it where it should redirect to our own page again. Okay, so this is now the full setup of the Kinde app, of the Reflex app with Kinde Auth. It's not so much code, and you can just copy paste it and use it for your own. Now let's see how it works in action. Yeah, very well. Oh, I'm already logged in. Okay, let's log out and let's see again how it works. So now we start a new one. We start by going to localhost 3000. Now we can see here, we saw the page shortly. If you don't want that anybody can see this page, then you just have two pages, right? Like one initial where people get redirected from and the main page. What did we do here? We couldn't find any of the URL parameters when we typed in localhost. And now we attempt the silent authentication, where we just send prompt is null. We are not authenticated currently. So what I do now is I just use my testing email. Great. Okay. And now that I'm authenticated, I get redirected back to my localhost Reflex app. And because there was the code, we could get the authenticated. So what happened here is we had some query parameters, the code and the state that we need, and also the scope. Then we exchanged it for the authorization code. We could fetch the token, which was nice. And then we updated the authentication state. And then here are the user details that are fetched. So my first name is Paul, my last name is Hi, which is not true, but hey, here is my email address and some picture, default picture. Then yeah, it redirects me to a clean URL so that I don't have to see the code. What happened now, I think, is that because the onMount function is fired twice, we tried to fetch the token twice, and one time we get an error because we can only fetch it once with this code. So here I should add now error handling that it doesn't get fetched twice. I mean, you get an error message. We have the error handling here. It's not that bad, but yeah, it doesn't look so good. Yeah, great. And now we are in here. We are logged in. We can do whatever we want. We can log out, and we are logged out again and redirected to the login page. Now let's also try it out with Google. So here now I get redirected. I can continue with Google. I didn't set up anything before. I just use Google as it is. We couldn't find an account. Oh, okay, create an account. Very good. Now I just... Oh, and I'm already in. Perfect. The reason why I didn't have to now sign in with Google is because I already signed in before with Google. I think something like this. So now I'm already authenticated. Yeah, this is great. You see, I didn't set anything up with Google. It just works. And yeah, I mean, that's it. No, that's I think that's very cool. You have very little code. You can customize anything. You can add as many social logins as you want. For this, you have to, let's check out here authentication, just that you can see it a little bit more. Here we have email code. We can also change it to email password. I personally prefer it. To get more of the social connections, we have to save it, right? Yeah. We can add, I don't know, GitHub, X, all the important connections, of course, and then it does boom. I have two. How does Kinde make money? They make money by using enterprise connections. So if you can use one enterprise connection, like DentroAI, for example, but then you have to upgrade. You can go here in users. We can see we have 2 users already. Now, what you can do is you can create so-called organizations where you just add an organization, you write here something, and then you can move users around. So you can have, this is very useful if you have client work, right? So you have one client, which is different branches, different departments, and they have different permissions. Then you can use here the organizations. If you want to change the design of all these pages, then just go here and then you click edit, and then you can change what is written. The only thing I don't like so much with this Auth provider is that I feel like it's a little bit complicated to maneuver. In the design, what you saw before, I cannot change every text, but only some of them. Some of them stay the same. But what I do like about it is that they have in the free plan included multi-factor authorization, social connections, and their Discord is very active. So if you ask something on Discord, you will get an answer, which is, well, reminds me of Reflex, which is also cool. Um, So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this right now. I think just for to be fair, I think you can also do this with Clerk because they also have a Python SDK. But I did already a Clerk with the wrapper, so I wanted to try something new. And yeah, now I'm here. We have the Reflex app running, and I hope this makes your life easier handling users in Reflex.